Uptown Saturday Night is the film. It stars Harry Belafonte, Sidney Poitier, and almost a who's who of Americans who have worked in theater. I don't know if all the people in the film ever studied at the American Negro Theater or the workshop and go back as far as you and your friend Sidney Poitier. But it's interesting that the two of you are back together in a movie after Buck and the Preacher, and that Poitier directed you. Let's talk about Sidney Poitier, actor as director. You've got two films.
I think that Sidney Poitier, as a director, has moved to what is the next logical step in his film career. I find in many ways that Sidney, at least from what he says to me, is at the moment quite unfulfilled with the whole idea of acting. I suspect that it's because of the choices that he makes in terms of the parts that he wants to play. And I don't think that he's as adventurous as an actor as many of us would like him to be. But that certainly isn't so in his personality as a director. He's very adventurous. And I think he makes a great director. And would make he's a good director now, and I think he can become a great director. And the first experience I had with him, of course, was in Buck and the Preacher. And he has a masterful way with actors, having had so much of his own experiences out of the arena of acting. So he knows how to manipulate, how to get from, how to extract from actors that which is necessary for the camera.
Let's talk about Gichi Dan Buford, because when people start seeing the film and seeing what you're doing, first of all, they aren't going to recognize you. What did you base the creation of Gichi Dan Buford on?
Well, there are two things. One is that the film is a comedy. It's highly specific in terms of a great deal that happens because it takes place in the black community with a black lifestyle. In the comedic thrust, I play the part of the major gangster in the community that is the key to that which Bill Cosby and Sidney Poitier, they're searching for something. And two things came to mind. One was certainly the whole image of the Godfather. But that was only a small part of it. The other part of it was that I came out of an environment as a boy that frothed with gangsters in the black community. Some of the members of my family were involved in the numbers business in New York. My uncle, the West Indians, as a matter of fact, I don't think many people know, but in the 30s and the 20s, the West Indian immigrant was perhaps one of the most forceful inter-group personalities of all blacks. They were not conditioned to the same kind of behavioral pattern that black Americans were subject to. Most black Americans came from the South, came to New York, came to Harlem. Many of the West Indies came off boats. They had an independence. They had a pride. They had an aggression about the animosities that were heaped upon them. And they found a greater dignity in living outside of the law, because living inside the law meant degradation, because the law never did anything to protect, but rather to harass. So many of them took on professions, either in the Prohibition period when they were running whiskey, or in the numbers business, which was very specific to the black community. It wasn't until in the late part of the 30s that organized crime began to move into what we know it to be today, because the Italians, in those days, the Italians very specifically dealt with the Italian community, the Irish with the Irish, the Jews with the Jewish, and the blacks with the black. And when they discovered the numbers business and what it meant in volumes of dollars that were being spent daily, it was the first time that the outside mobs began to move in to take over the numbers racket. And it wasn't until, I think, really at the end of the Second World War, the trafficking of drugs and narcotics and whatnot became a factor in the crime pattern.
Harry, we're going to take a break, and we'll be right back with Harry Belafonte, Uptown Saturday Night, and a scene from that film right after this. Harry Belafonte's film career is a very interesting one because one can go back to 1953 in a film like Bright Road and Dorothy Dandridge, who, you know, there's a lady, a black American actress, and her contribution to film and the fact that you worked with her more than once.
3 times.
And it's such a tragic story. What happened to that woman?
I think that Dorothy Dandridge was plagued with the things that I think that plague most black actresses. She was gifted. I don't think she had the kind of a dramatic intensity that, say, a Ruby Dee has, or a number of other actresses that I can think of. But certainly in terms of Hollywood, certainly in terms of glamour, she possessed all of the qualities and the credentials like a Lena Horne. But there comes an automatic stop line for black actresses. If you're a white actress, if you're Elizabeth Taylor, Gina Lollobrigida, if you're whomever, and you become successful in something and you're discovered by the camera as something that is exciting on film, these women have the capacity to move from a starring part with Marlon Brando to a starring part with Kirk Douglas to Burt Lancaster. And as a consequence, there's always an open arena to them in terms of choices. A black actress attains a certain level of success or achievement, and if it isn't, certainly in those days, it may be a little less now, but the characteristics are still pretty much the same. There are very few super black stars. I think Sidney Poitier is the only real one that exists. There's some that are coming along. But it was very hard-pressed to find parts to do things, and Dorothy was constantly plagued with the fact that ultimately her career was going nowhere. She found a part here, a part there. It was a Porgy and Bess. It was an Island in the Sun. It was always the same kind of part. And there wasn't the evidence of this kind of continuance of work available.
Was Diana Sands a friend of yours?
Yes, she was.
Did people in the theater and the entertainment industry know how ill that woman was, or was it a secret? You did know she was ill. Because there's a woman, I remember she did a pilot for a television series that was one of the most witty, literate premises for a TV show. And of course, you talk about Dorothy Dandridge, there's a woman, Diana Sands, who did St. Joan, tremendous acclaim, worked in everything from A Raisin to in the Sun, The Sign in Sidney Brewstein's Window, did The Owl and the Pussycat, and really moved from vehicle to vehicle as an actress. So maybe it was the timing. Maybe Dorothy Dandridge never had the chances. Or maybe she didn't have as much talent as a Diana Sands. One doesn't know.
That certainly has validity in your observation, but it certainly isn't a credential, because there are too many stars who are white that do not possess talent, that possess another quality that continually perpetuates itself. I'm really making the statement that racism plays a very important part in the decision as to what happens to a lot of black actors and actresses. For instance, the things that I would like to do on the screen, that if Hollywood and the bankers determine that it is not commercial or it isn't how they want to see blacks, then you just don't get funded. It's as simple as that. Superfly, fine. Some black guy full of anger running across the screen doing all the kind of 007 antics is an easier commodity to sell Hollywood rather than to see us in another kind of a context.
That's true. We're going to take another break, and we'll be right back with Harry Belafonte, Uptown, Saturday Night, and other films. Harry Belafonte is with us, and we've been talking about Uptown, Saturday Night, among other films. And something interesting has happened to the American motion picture industry. A new phraseology like blaxploitation has come in. And one sees Superfly and Black Eye and Superfly TNT and all of these films. And it almost seems in a way that since the new film we're talking about is a comedy, and it ends happily, and people within the film actually have jobs. I mean, they work at something, excluding you, but you hold a lot of big meetings. But is it an attempt, we know about Harbell Productions and how you got together and formed a production company, obviously to have more control over what you did as a performing artist. Is it like an antidote Are you
Yes.
trying to overcome
Yes,
something?
I think we're trying to accomplish two things. One is to overcome the precedent that exists now in the making of black films. And secondly is to broaden the arena, to show that there are choices that can be made with material that's of great interest to the community. You see, I have to just go back a little bit and just say that there was a time when the black community represented an automatic guarantee at the box office for Hollywood. Whether it was a Lassie picture, a Tarzan picture, no matter what it was, they knew that the black community represented a certain force at the box office, and they paid for everything. And they did that indiscriminately. With the advent of the civil rights movement, a lot of things happened to the community at large. The priorities were changed. A greater sense of self became more evident. People became much more conscious about what they were doing to themselves and what was being done to their image as a nation, as a community, as a group. And they became much more selective in what they were going to see and not see, and they did not become that automatic thing at the box office. If a film came along that had no relevance to black interest, it dipped seriously at the box office. Not all films, but they just didn't become that easy Saturday night crowd. And then with the making of films like Cotton Comes to Harlem and with Superfly and whatnot, at that moment, the black community said, hey, you know, we are prepared to support our own. We are prepared to support things that we feel that are relevant. The tragedy of that was that the content of this material, first of all, became a caricature of everything that was bad that was being done in white films. But it appealed to the young because these films dealt with nothing but anger. They dealt with rip-off. They dealt with a certain aggression against a society and an establishment that black people had a grievance with. Take Superfly, for instance, which I resent and I dislike intensely as a film. The great trap in that is that you're asked in this film to root for a man who, in real life, is one of the great villains in the black community. He's a dope pusher. He's a user of women. He debases them. He debases life. But you're asked in the film to root for him because he is the enemy of a corrupt white policeman. And this has been imposed on this community. And the people have responded to that. Now, a lot of us have taken a position against that. I'm not interested in seeing black pictures at any price, nor am I interested, nor will I support censorship. So in a way, I have to support the right for that kind of film to be made. But I do not think the black entrepreneur, the black movie maker, is exerting enough of a consciousness about what should be made. So Sidney Poitier and I got together. The first film we did was Buck and the Preacher, which had all of the characteristics of a Western adventure, but it really dealt with black history. Now this film, I'm just an actor in it. It was Sidney's film, it was his idea. He called upon all of these actors, Flip Wilson, Richard Pryor, Bill Cosby, myself, Paula Kelly,
Rosalind Cash.
And this is a story about, it's a comedy about certain things that happen. And the fact that you observe that the people have jobs, they have functions, they have other functions in the community is a part of what Sidney set out to do, and I think successfully.
And the villains get caught, and the good people live happily ever after. Right. But you know, let's talk about Harry Belafonte, producer. We know a lot about you as a performing artist, as all of your involvements in performing art. But as a producer, you not only formed Harbell Productions, you distributed award-winning Czech films like The Hand. You helped young filmmakers. You became involved with the brilliant Czech director Jan Kadar, with whom you made the film The Angel Levine. But something else happened during the making of The Angel Levine. You hired 26 young men under a program of training, of learning about the industry, of working on a motion picture, and the union stepped in. And the union said, Harry Belafonte can't get away with this. You can't bring in 26 young people and let them learn about the industry. But you didn't stop there. First of all, I'd like to know why they tried to interfere with you helping young people learn about the industry and what you did to keep the people on.
Well, there's one thing that's left out in the definition of those young people, is that they were all young people of color. They were
26 black people.
Black, Mexican, Chicano, Puerto Rican, They came from a broad cross-section of people of color in the United States who had interest in film and had been working in film workshops but never got into the professional arena. And the unions consistently barred them. And we set up a program which we thought, once submitted to the unions would see the practical sense in what we were doing, and at least on a human level would have been able to respond to what this whole project meant. But the union, which was a closed shop, most of them on the set, really got uptight. The patronage that they have in unions, at least down there at that time, played a very heavy role. And I was told that if one of those young people came on set and touched anything or did anything, that the picture wouldn't be made. I then said, all right, I hadn't made a film in 10 years. I was producing this one. I had Zero Mistel and Jan Kadar on a major project on my hand. I was using the money from United Artists. And I said, I'll wait for a time that is more propitious. And I went home, and I couldn't sleep, because that's what they always said to me when I made certain demands about what I wanted to do, that I should come at a time that was more propitious. Well, what the hell is a time that's more propitious? When is it better? When is it going to be more convenient? If it wasn't convenient then, it would never be convenient. So I said, there is no more time that's propitious. I don't care about the $2 million or Kadar or anybody else. These 26 people are interested in film. If I do nothing but bring them up and line them up against the wall and let them watch what's going on for the 12 weeks we're on this film. And that's exactly what happened. They came in and I took a toss of the dice.
But you also went after a Ford Foundation grant.
Well, the Ford Foundation grant was what helped keep them there, because they were paid $100 a week. And I watched the seething in the first couple of days. And then something happened. When it came a coffee break, the technicians, the union people, and the apprentices were bumping into each other with the coffee machine. And somebody would pour a cup of coffee, and they'd look, and he says, do you take it with cream and sugar? And the guy would look nonplussed. He says, well, yeah, a little sugar. And hand him a cup. Or somebody would come with a newspaper, and either the Dodgers had done something or the Montreal team had done something, and they got into a dialogue. And a dialogue on a human level started. And before I knew it, some technicians were saying, well, that's called a LECO, and the function of that light, or this is called a this, or that is called a that, and a dialogue started. And two of the unions in the shop held a meeting and decided to vote the program into the unions, because they found that there was nothing to be afraid of, that they were not headhunters, that they weren't cruel people. There was a great sensitivity and something to be liked about what they wanted to do. And this set the pace for the other unions who opened up. And then other motion pictures, Norman Jewison and a number of people, took over the project and had these same people to continue to develop and to grow. And now many of them are in the unions, and it worked out.
We're going to take another break, and we'll be right back with Harry Belafonte, Uptown Saturday Night, and movies, right after this. Harry Belafonte is with us, and we've been talking about movies, and specifically Uptown Saturday Night, which is his new film. But you know, I brought up a point that I find particularly ironic, that you made a film called Carmen Jones, right?
Right.
And you and Sidney Poitier and Dorothy Dandridge and Pearl Bailey and a lot of fabulous people. But it wasn't generally known at the time. But names like Laverne Hutchinson and now Marilyn Horne, one of the greatest voices in the world, and Marvin Hayes, and you were all dubbed. I mean, here was Harry Belafonte in a big 20th Century Fox movie directed by Otto the Hun Preminger, and your voice is dubbed. Why was your voice dubbed?
Well, first of all, Sidney was in another picture. He was in Porgy and Bess.
Oh, Porgy and Bess, sorry.
But his voice was
Right.
dubbed, too. At that time, two things happened. One was that the Bizet estate in France, which had the control over what would happen to Bizet's music, and their copyright laws were a little different, swore that they would never permit the film to show in Europe over the ears that they controlled, because they felt that too many liberties had been taken with the libretto and with the music of Bizet. Hammerstein, who was a man of great integrity, thought that the liberties that he took were within the context of the integrity of the piece. They felt that if they could persuade the Bizet people that it was not going to be just a folk opera, but there would be classical voices producing the same qualities that Bizet had originally written, that might soften the impact of the European market. And I was told when I was hired that I would be dubbed. At that point, I was well on my way into a successful career as a singer. And I got very uptight about that. But then I decided to do the film because there was one thing that was always plaguing a lot of black actors and filmmakers in the United States, and that was that the concept that anything all black was a sure way to bankruptcy, and they would recite Cabin in the Sky and Stormy Weather as films that were not successful. Green Pastures, that were not successful as all black films. And I felt that with Otto Preminger directing, with 20th Century Fox behind it, with Oscar Hammerstein, with Pearl Bailey, Dorothy Dandridge, and whatnot, now in the middle of the 1950s, we stood a chance to dispel that myth. So we all did the film. We permitted ourselves to be dubbed. The film came out, and it was an incredible success.
It's one of Variety's all-time top grossers, still, after all these years. We have run out of time again, and we haven't talked about Otto the Hun Preminger or a lot of other things, but maybe another time. I want to thank you again.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Harry Belafonte, Uptown Saturday Night. Good night.